makes you look like a professional pie baker, even if you're not, even if this is your first time, or you're just a home baker who likes to make pie. Hi, I'm Amy. This is House of Nash Eats, and today we are making peach pie. All right, so when you're making peach pie, for me, the hardest part is actually peeling the peaches. It's actually not hard. It's actually super easy if you know this trick. So the best way to peel peaches is using boiling water and an ice water bath. So bring a large pot of water to a boil and get your peaches ready. And some people like to score an X in the bottom of the peaches. I don't ever really find that's necessary, but you're welcome to use a sharp knife to make a little X. We're gonna plunge these into the hot water for about 30 seconds and then put them in ice water to shock the peaches, and it's going to make the peels just release. The skin will just release from the peach, come right off. It's so easy. Let me show you how it's done. Okay, so our peaches are going right into our boiling water, and you can really do kind of a bunch of these at once. We're just gonna wait 30 seconds. If you do it much longer than that, it's going to start to cook the outside of the peach, but when you do it just for a short amount of time in really hot water and then put them in ice water, it stops the cooking process so that they don't overcook and start turning brown. Okay, so I'm gonna start taking them out and plopping them in my ice water. Okay, and then I'm going to grab some of the ones on the bottom that have already been shocked. So if you just pinch at the top, the skin will just peel right off. And then you can just slide the rest of the skin right off the peach, just like that. And there you have a perfectly peeled peach. It's so easy, it takes like a minute if you know how to do it. Otherwise, you're going to struggle with a peeler or a sharp paring knife to peel all the skin off of your peaches, and that's just no fun. So try this easy way. If you haven't tried it before, it's kind of magical. Okay, so I know I'm going to get asked, can I make this pie with canned peaches? And the answer is yes, you absolutely can use canned peaches in this pie. Just drain them first and get rid of the juice. But I will say that fresh peaches have a different flavor than canned peaches, and they're definitely my preference. For us, this is a seasonal summer pie. That's when we make it. My preference, if you don't have fresh peaches, is to actually use frozen peaches. I feel like those give a better flavor. Okay, so once you have your peaches all peeled, we're going to slice the peaches. Now, there are actually two kinds of peaches, and you may not know this, but there are freestone peaches and there are cling peaches. And freestone peaches are the kind where when you cut into the peach and cut around the circumference, you can just peel the peach apart and the pit comes right out, and it's super easy. Everybody loves freestone peaches. These are not freestone peaches. These are cling peaches, which means that the flesh of the peach is going to stick to the pit, which is kind of a bummer, but it's all we have right now in season at our farmer's market. So sometimes they'll just break apart and the seed will just fall apart in the middle. And with cling peaches, that kind of works out well because then you can just use a sharp knife to kind of cut around the edge and peel off individual wedges of the peach. And they'll peel off better that way from the pit than if you were to try to get the pit out of there, taking the whole, like, half of the peach off of it. Or you can just slice away from the pit. Okay, so once you've got your peaches all peeled and sliced, which they might slice a little bit prettier if you've got freestone peaches, but even if they're a little bit less like sharp and perfect, it's totally fine. Cling peaches have just as good of flavor as freestone peaches. We're gonna fill a bowl with them, and I've got about 6 cups, five or six cups of peaches in here. And we're going to add about half a cup of granulated sugar. And we're going to mix those together. And the reason we're doing this is it's going to draw out even more of the juices from your peaches, which you can see my peaches are already very, very juicy. They're super fresh, ripe peaches. But even like ripe peaches won't always be this juicy depending on the variety. So once you've mixed that sugar, we're gonna let these sit for 30 minutes up to an hour to pull out as much of that juice as it can, and then I'll show you what we're gonna do with it to make sure we don't have a soggy peach pie. In the meantime, we're gonna start working on our crust. Okay, so now that we have had our peaches macerating for like 30 minutes, they've released a lot of juice. So I'm going to take a strainer and put them over a bowl. We're gonna pour our peaches out to strain off some of those juices. Okay, and you can see a whole bunch of juice just came out of those peaches, and we don't wanna get rid of that because that's a whole lot of flavor. So we'll put our sliced peaches back into this other bowl. Okay, and then I'm gonna grab a medium or a small saucepan, whatever you have on hand, and we're gonna pour this into our saucepan. And I'm actually just gonna measure this out real quick. This is a 1 cup jar, so I've got just a little over a cup, like a cup and a tablespoon of juice. What we're going to do is we're going to go set this back on the stove and let it simmer for a little while until it reduces by about half. And that's going to cook off a lot of the liquid and it will thicken into a syrup. It'll still be runny, but it's going to thicken up so we don't risk a soggy bottom pie crust in our peach pie. And then we'll add it back into the peaches in just a little bit. Okay, while that peach juice is thickening into a syrup on our stovetop, we're gonna add the rest of our filling ingredients. So I've got 3 tablespoons of cornstarch and 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. And I like to use both. You could thicken a pie with just cornstarch or just flour. With my peach pie, I just like using both. And it's a good way of showing you how you can do it both ways. Then I've got a little bit of cinnamon, which just kind of warms up the flavor of the peach pie without being overwhelming. So it's a little spice and a little bit, just a pinch of allspice. You could also use nutmeg if you prefer. And then I'm going to squeeze about half of a lemon for about a tablespoon of juice. Just make sure you don't get any seeds in there. This keeps the peaches from browning and it just freshens the flavor and brightens it up a little bit. Then I've got a little bit of vanilla. Okay, and we're going to toss those all together. That way it's all evenly coated. And you'll start seeing even more juice will continue to come out of your peaches, but the cornstarch and flour are going to take care of that and thicken it right up while the pie bakes. Okay, we're going to set this aside while we roll out our pie crust. Okay, now it's time to roll out our bottom pie crust. So I've got my pie crust, it's been chilling in the fridge. You could also freeze these pie crusts and just pull them out and thaw them on the counter for an hour before you use it. They'll freeze for 3 months in your freezer and then you've always got a pie crust on hand. So put it on a floured surface and sprinkle the top of your pie crust with some more flour and rub it around, and you can press it down just so it doesn't stick to your hands or to the counter. I like to double check before I start rolling this out too much. And then grab your rolling pin and we're just going to press it out in firm strokes. You don't want to roll back and forth because it tends to stick more that way. And if it starts to crack around the edges, you can just squeeze it back together to fix some of those cracks. But you can see on this crust that it is marbled with specks of butter in the crust, and that's going to make it so flaky and wonderful for our peach pie. Okay, then just take your pie plate. I've got a 9-inch metal pie plate that I love to use. You can use glass or whatever, and make sure it's going to fit your pie crust. Then I like to use my bench scraper tool to scrape up the edges of my pie crust. And some people will fold and transfer. I like to use my rolling pin, and I just roll my pie crust up onto my rolling pin and transfer it to my pie plate. And rather than pushing it down in, you just kind of settle it down in so you don't stretch out the pie crust too much. And it should overhang on all the sides so there's a little lip to give you an edge crust. Okay, now we're gonna grab our filling. All right, so we've got our peach pie filling, and I've got my syrup from the juices that I have simmered down till it's about half a cup. So it's about reduced by about half. And I'm just going to add this back in because that's got a lot of the sugar that we added to our pie crust, and it's got a lot of the peach flavor that we're going to want in our pie. I used to skip this step, and sometimes I still do if I'm in a rush and I don't want to be bothered. And you can just toss all of the pie filling ingredients together and dump it in the pie. But when the peaches are extra juicy, like these ones happened to be, I like to take this extra little bit of time to do this step just to make sure I don't have a runny peach pie when I slice it. So So we just mixed that in, and we're going to use this to fill up our pie crust. Okay, and this filling is totally cool. You don't want to add hot filling to your pie crust or it will melt the butter in your crust, and you don't want that to happen until you're ready to start baking. And you can see it's nice and level. You don't want to mound this too high in the center. So now we're going to set this to the side and cut out our lattice crust. All right, so we'll sprinkle some more flour on our surface and grab our second pie crust. Don't be afraid to add a little more flour if you need to, so this doesn't stick to your rolling pin or to your counters. All right, once we've got our top pie crust rolled out, we're going to use a pizza cutter or a sharp knife or some other kind of pastry cutter to cut this into strips. And you can do these whatever size you like. I'm going to do them about 1 inch wide. And I'm just eyeballing this. You could use a ruler and make sure these are really precise. You could get really fancy and do braided strips. But I'm just doing a pretty home style southern peach pie look. All right, now I'm gonna show you how we make a lattice crust on our peach pie. So start by taking strips from the middle that are your longest strips and just lay them down across your pie. And you're going to want to leave a little bit of space between them, just however much you want is personal preference. But these strips are about 1 inch wide, and I'm probably leaving about 1/2 inch between each of, and use your shorter strips to do the edge pieces or the sides when you get to them. Okay, and then the trick to this is you don't just lay them straight across for the alternating stripes. You want to pull back every other strip. And then we're going to do the same thing, just going down the middle, where you take your longer strips and lay one down, and then you lift these alternating strips back into place. And then you do the opposite strips to create this woven lattice crust that makes you look like a professional pie baker, even if you're not, even if this is your first time, or you're just a home baker who likes to make pie. I know a lot of people are intimidated by lattice crusts, but they're honestly really fun to make and so satisfying to do. But if you would rather, you could totally make this pie with a solid crust. Just be sure to slice holes in the top of it so that the pie can vent. Because it's a really juicy filling, it needs those slats so that some of the steam can get out of the pie. All right, I'm gonna grab a knife and we're gonna trim up and finish the edges of our pie. Okay, so I'm just going to cut off any overhanging bits of my lattice work. I don't like to trim this too close in because I like having a thick crust around the edge for a couple of reasons. One, I just like the flavor of it. I love pie crust, and so having a little bit of thicker crust is kind of like, I like eating the crust on pizza, I like eating the crust on pie. But also, we're going to fold this over and it's going to create a little bit of a barrier just to help so your peach pie doesn't bubble over in the oven. There's still always a chance, so I recommend baking this on a baking sheet lined with some aluminum foil just for easier cleanup. But I actually usually don't have a problem when I do a thicker pie crust around the edge. So now you can fold the crust in on itself, or you could fold under. I'm gonna fold in today. This is going to give us a nice, really finished, seamless look to our pie crust. And you can kind of see what I mean about it creating like a little dam or wall around the top of your pie that's going to help keep that filling from bubbling up and over too badly. Okay, and then we're just going to use our thumb and forefinger or 2 fingers to kind of pinch those together. This helps seal the crust around the edge and it gives it a really decorative finish. I love peach pie. It's one of my all-time favorite pie flavors. I think it's just as classic as cherry or apple, but it's way more seasonal because I really usually only make this during the summer when I can get fresh peaches. That's it. This pie is ready to go into the oven at about 400 degrees for about 50 minutes until it is golden on top and the filling is bubbling, and you'll be able to see that through the lattice. You might want to check it about 30 minutes into the bake to see if the crust is browning too much around the edges. And if it is, grab a piece of foil or a pie crust shield and put that around your crust so it doesn't get too dark around your edges. All right, so the hardest part about this pie, honestly, is waiting for it to cool all the way at the very end. So once the pie came out of the oven, I have let it cool now for 4 hours so that it's still a little warm, but it's not that warm. If you start cutting right into this pie, no matter what you do, it's going to be soupy in the middle. Peaches are a really soft, juicy fruit, and they need time in this filling, and most fruit pie fillings need time to set up. So let it cool all the way, make it the day before, and eat it the next day. You can always warm it up in the oven for 10 to 15 minutes if you want to. All right, so now for my favorite part, I get to taste this peach pie, and I have really been looking forward to this. Okay, this is so good. If you love peaches and you've never made peach pie, this has to go on your list for this summer. It's so delicious, it tastes fresh and juicy, absolutely like summertime. I hope you guys love this peach pie recipe. Let me know in the comments below what you like to make with fresh peaches when they're in season. Be sure to like and subscribe to my channel for more videos just like this.